everyone. The Supreme Court handed down two immigration decisions this week, two in a single day. Now, they have failed to meet the deadline before July 4th, which is traditionally been when they release a whole bunch of decisions. And I want to be honest with you because that's what we do here. There are two completely reasonable reactions to what happened. You can look at these rulings and say, the law said what the law said. The executive branch has discretion. Courts aren't supposed to micromanage immigration policy. That is a serious argument. Legal scholars make it, and you can also look at these rulings and say, we just cleared the path to deport 350,000 Haitians back to a country ran by gangs. People who've lived here for years, paid taxes, raised kids in American schools, and we did it the same week we told asylum seekers at the border that you don't have rights. What nobody on cable news is asking is who does this actually serve? Because here's what's happening. In the same week these rulings came down, the Senate just passed a $70 billion bill to fund ICE and Border Patrol through the end of Trump's term. $70 billion. And while that was happening, the administration threw what was supposed to be America's 250th birthday party on the National Mall, and almost nobody showed up. Artists bailed, states bailed, a fifth of the country sent no official delegation, the Ferris wheel broke, the ice cream melted, and they're still trying to tell you it was incredible and thousands of people were there. So we've got the Supreme Court rewriting who gets to be here, Congress writing checks for who gets kicked out, and a president who can't even get people to come to his own party. I don't know about you, but when I look at all of this together, I start asking, what exactly is the story they're not telling us? Because the headline is immigration, but the story underneath is about who gets to decide, who gets to stay, and who's running out of options. I'm Cameron Rudat. This is Average American, and we will be right back after the break. All right, quick break, and I want to talk to you about something that actually fits what we're doing today. You know, one of the things that frustrates me most about the current political moment is how loving this country has somehow become a partisan statement. Like you're supposed to pick a side, and then only that side gets to wave the flag. That's not America, that's a bumper sticker. And the people at It's Cool to Love America get that. This isn't a left or a right thing. It's an American thing. It's the idea that you can be proud of this country, believe in what it's supposed to stand for, and still hold it accountable when it falls short. In fact, that's exactly what loving it looks like. They make gear, hats, shirts, accessories that lets you rep that without it being a political statement, just a statement that you give a damn. Head over to itscooltoLoveAmerica.com and use my code Cameron at checkout to get a discount on your order. Wear it to the polls this November, wear it to your town hall, wear it when you're knocking on doors or just sitting at your kitchen table doing the homework to figure out who deserves your vote. Because it is cool to love America. What isn't cool is sitting on the sidelines while other people decide what it looks like. It's cooltoloveamerica.com, code KAMERON, Cameron, to get 10% off your first order. Okay, so the Supreme Court made two big decisions this week. In the big picture, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that courts cannot review DHS decisions to end temporary protected status. This is written by Justice Alito, same justice who wrote the asylum ruling the same day. Liberals dissented hard. Kagan said Trump's statements about Haitians shout racial undertones and overtones alike. Sotomayor read her dissent from the bench, a rare symbolic act of protest. So what is temporary protected status? A humanitarian program created by Congress in 1990 designated for people already in the U.S. from countries hit by war, disaster, or chaos. Haiti's TPS started after the 2010 earthquake, a 7.0 that killed hundreds of thousands. Since then, presidential assassination, gang control, political collapse, Haiti is not stable whatsoever. Syria's TPS started in 2012 during Assad's brutal crackdown on civilians. 350,000 Haitians plus 6,000 Syrians are directly affected by this ruling. We aren't sure how this ruling will affect the other courts that are trying to stop Trump from stripping the TPS on other nations as well. 190,000 Haitian TPS holders were employed in early 2025. They contribute an estimated $5.9 billion to the U.S. economy, pay $1.6 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. Florida has the largest Haitian TPS population, which is why I'm talking about this, because I live in Florida. So let's just use common sense here. We'd lose $5.9 billion from the US economy. We'd lose 190,000 workers. We'd lose 6,000 Syrians as well, and most of that will impact Florida. Here's what the courts actually said. Alito said courts have no jurisdiction to review DHS decisions on TPS termination for constitutional claims. On the racial discrimination claim from the Haitians, Alito said Trump's statements weren't overly racial, even though he said that they were eating the dogs and cats in Ohio. He called it a trashy country, etc. Kagan said the statements fairly shout in their racial undertones and overtones alike that race entered into the president's resolve. This is the crux of the what they're not telling you angle. The court essentially said racially coded language isn't proof of racial intent. So the question is, how do we determine if the intent was racial? Okay, so what's going to happen next is once the temporary protected status ends, holders with no other legal status become deportable. Now, under TPS, they have to go in for like yearly check-ins, and most of them do. Most of them are following that rule. Once they go into that check-in, there's a chance that ICE could deport them because of this new ruling, and they don't even have to look into their background or give a reason why other than citing this ruling from SCOTUS. The individual circumstances vary. Some may have other paths to legal status. Attorneys warn, do not wait until ICE is at your door to figure that out, though. Some Republicans have quietly pushed back, worried about workforce impacts, which I cited earlier. We lose $1.9 billion in the U.S. economy. Advocates are pushing Congress to extend TPS legislatively. No bill yet. We just need immigration reform at this point. Now, do I think this was justified? Absolutely not. It's going to have a huge impact on the economy, and I don't think Trump is taking that into account. Also, since when does the president just have unchecked power, and why is SCOTUS allowing that? The president literally just said, we're going to stop these people from being allowed to come here, and we're going to send the ones that are already here back. We're going to lose a lot of workers. Yeah. Plus all of the money that we're going to spend on deporting. Are we serious right now? And the president's acting like Haiti got better. No, it's gotten worse. It's ran by gangs. They keep killing the presidents. They can't really do elections because it's ran by gangs. They keep having all of these natural disasters. They're having major famines because of the war. Why are we willing to lose that much, not only of the economy, but having to send all of these people back to a horrible place where it's very unstable and volatile? And if temporary becomes permanent reality, at what point does the policy become cruelty? And the same notion goes for SCOTUS's second decision this week. Asylum seekers can be turned back at the border. The case was Mullen, which was Mark Wayne Mullen, the DHS secretary now, versus Al Otro Lado. It was again 6-3. The ruling is basically if you're standing on Mexican soil trying to enter the U.S. at any official port of entry, you do not have the right to apply for asylum. The court said you must physically cross the border before asylum protections kick in. Now, we're going to have to do some mental gymnastics here because this doesn't make any freaking sense. To enter the country legally, which the president wants and I think is right, you have to go to these ports. But SCOTUS decided, well, you can't file for asylum if you aren't on American soil. But when you're at the port, you aren't on American soil. Half of it's Mexican soil because you're crossing over. So what is this going to force people to do? It's going to force people to enter the country illegally, then file for asylum because then they'd be on U.S. soil, right? Does that make sense? Alito said no one would say a person arrives in a place before they enter it, treated as a plain language question. So Alito is basically citing a loophole in the legislation here. He's saying you can't arrive at a place before you enter it, because in the legislation for asylum, it says that once you arrive here. Sure, that's a point, but that doesn't make it a good one. People to enter, they want you to go into the country illegally because hence that's the only way that you can file for asylum now when you're on US soil. Does that make sense? I'm like, so this is going to force people to enter the country illegally. This is gonna wreck Trump's border numbers if those are even true. Right now, it's supposedly at almost zero because he's literally gonna be forcing people to enter the country illegally so then they can seek asylum. Are we being for real right now? Like, now this revives the metering policy. CBP can cap how many asylum seekers they process per day and turn the rest away. Why? So this revives the metering policy. CBP can cap how many asylum seekers they process per day and turn the rest away. CBP technically doesn't have to process any asylum seekers now because they haven't entered while they're arriving. That's the argument that they're making. Metering was first used under Obama, a bipartisan tool. Technically originally created in response to a surge of Haitians at the San Diego crossing. It was expanded under Trump 1.0 to all southern border crossings in 2021. Federal judge ruled it violated the law. Metering was killed. The Trump administration specifically asked SCOTUS to resurrect it. They agreed, even though that federal judge ruled it violated the law. Now, U.S. asylum law has required officials to inspect anyone presenting themselves at a port of entry for over 45 years. This ruling effectively says the president can physically block access to the asylum system without violating the law. Justice Sotomayor, reading dissent aloud, the ruling, quote, extinguishes the light of torch of the Statue of Liberty, end quote. Alito is in an unusual move, publicly responded from the bench, pointed out metering was used under two administration. Critics say this decision creates an incentive for illegal crossing rather than legal port of entry, which is the point that I'm literally making right now. If the president wants less illegal entry, why is he asking SCOTUS to resurrect this? And SCOTUS ruled that, you can't arrive until you enter, so ICE could just turn away any asylum seeker unless they're on U.S. soil. Then they'd be violating the law. But the only way to get onto U.S. soil, I guess, when you're planning on filing for asylum is to enter it illegally, then file then. So it undermines Trump's goal for less illegal immigration. Now, this was two immigration rulings in one day, both written by Alito, both going in the same direction. The question for many centrist people is this restoring executive authority, or is it dismantling a legal safety net that Congress built? Metering under Obama was used sparingly. The question is whether a tool built for surges becomes a permanent policy of exclusion. We just need crazy amounts of immigration reform. We need to rethink everything. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but we need to rethink everything because it's ridiculous that SCOTUS is giving the executive branch unchecked power. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. That is not good, whatever side you are on. Whoever is in office, that is not good. That is not good at all. And we're seeing more and more SCOTUS decisions like this. Now they have yet to give us any more. We were expecting a whole plethora of them this week because that is what happened in previous years. They usually do it before their July 4th vacation, but they haven't done it this year. So we'll see how this plays out. We will see what happens. We will see what other SCOTUS decisions are out. Okay. Now, there were major news on the Hill today, $70 billion to fund ICE and Customs and Border Protection through the end of Trump's term, so until 2028. Passed in the Senate 52-47 over an 18-hour overnight vote. One Republican, Murkowski, said no. The House passed it 214 to 212 on June 9th, signed into law June 10th, missed Trump's June 1st deadline. I used budget reconciliation, bypassed the 60-vote Senate threshold, no Democratic votes needed. Here's what nearly killed it. The $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund, an internal Republican civil war. Basically, half of the Republicans are saying, this is just a slush fund for anyone who claims that they were targeted by the DOJ. The other half says this is good and that this is needed. Originally part of a settlement for Trump's lawsuit against his own government over the 2019 tax record leaks. We covered that in a past episode. But basically, Trump sued the IRS. The IRS reached a deal, which the IRS is part of the government of which he oversees. So he basically gave himself a deal, which why isn't SCOTUS ruling on that? Because that sounds very illegal. Sadly, it's not. Critics called it a slush fund, money for Trump and his allies with no accountability. Senator Bill Cassidy said, quote, people are concerned about paying their mortgage, not about a $1.8 billion fund for the president and his allies, end quote. Exactly. Why are we spending $1.8 billion on people who claim that they were targeted by the government when we could be using that money and adding it to the Affordable Housing Act that Trump refuses to sign until the Save America Act passes? Colin Sullivan and Husted, all facing tough 2026 re-elections, voted to kill the fund, and it eventually failed 49-50. Thank God. Also stripped $1 billion for White House security tied to Trump's proposed 90,000 square feet East Wing ballroom. 7 Republicans voted to block it. The reason why is when Trump first came out with the idea of this ballroom, he said, we're going to demolish the East Ring, but the taxpayers aren't going to fund it. Well, now he has Congress voting on the taxpayers funding it. This just shows the cracks in the Republican unity, and it's very real. This nearly fell apart over internal corruption concerns from the executive branch. The anti-weaponization fund was dropped from the final bill, but not permanently killed. It's still in the litigation. ICE now has a guaranteed funding runway through January of 2029. This cements the deportation infrastructure that SCOTUS decided on earlier this week. This is the legislative infrastructure that is backing the SCOTUS decisions. So I think the White House, knew how SCOTUS was going to rule. All 3 stories connect. The question nobody's asking, if TPS ends and asylum is blocked, there are 1.3 million people to go, and who profits from removing them? The taxpayers definitely will not, because we have to pay for it, and we need to hold both parties accountable because Democrats used DHS shutdown to strip enforcement funding. Republicans used it to slip in a president's personal slush fund. A lot of yapping. Just this entire administration is a joke. The Great American State Fair that is supposed to be on the National Mall was put on by Freedom 250. Now, I've gone through the difference between America 250 and Freedom 250 in a past episode. We're just going to review that right now. So, Freedom 250 is the White House's initiative to put on a party for America's 250th birthday. America 250 is the bipartisan coalition that Congress voted on and back in, I believe it was 2015. Either it's 15 or 16. Now, America 250 has to disclose their donors, what they're paying for, because it's funded by the taxpayers. Freedom 250 does not disclose its donors and has no independent congressional oversight. It is managed by Event Strategies Incorporated and Justin Caparel, the same team behind the January 6th Ellipse rally. Now, here's what happened. Artists bailed in the previous weeks. Martina McBride said, quote, what we were told is, in fact, not what is happening, end quote. She thought it was nonpartisan. Brett Michaels, Morris Day, and the Time, the Commodores are all out. Vanilla Ice was the last act standing. The show was later canceled due to inclement weather. Now, I want to focus on that issue right there. Inclement weather. Yesterday, they ended up shutting down the fair, citing weather concerns. It was not raining. It was not cold. Across the street, the World Cup watch party was still going on, which is put on by Freedom 250. They did that because nobody's showing up to this fair. Literally, many states bailed out. About a fifth of the states sent no official delegation and spent no public money on it. Power failures on day one. Ice cream melted. The Ferris wheel went down. Sparse crowds. Trump claimed 45,000 on Truth Social. There's no verification of that. CNN's Donnie O'Sullivan reported live with empty space visibly directly behind him 20 minutes before Trump spoke. Even Fox News host praised the events while on camera showed nearly empty lawns. Here's the other thing. A decorative replica arch began deteriorating within 3 days due to weather. Now, that is the arch that Trump wants to put on Constitution Avenue, leading up to Arlington National Cemetery at that roundabout. Now, this replica arch looks horrendous. It's literally just a cardboard box and it's starting to fall apart. Trump's opening speech begged people to come, said on July 4th, please show up because if we have two empty seats, you know what's going to happen. Seems like they have thousands of empty seats. A digital billboard promoting the event had a typo in the name of the sponsoring organization, which is Freedom 250. They spelled freedom with two E's. Okie dokie. Three-time Trump voter Charles De Jesus, who anticipated the fair for 6 months, said, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Transportation Sean Duffy called the musicians who declined libtards not exactly a unifying message. $14 million in taxpayer funds spent repainting the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. The paint job reportedly failed within days. We've covered that. And yeah, that was supposed to be done by this because it's on the National Mall. I think the reflecting pool is a great example and visualization, visual representation of this administration. The cracks are clearly showing. Now, America's 250th deserved a better birthday party. All of this happened in 1 week. Two Supreme Court rulings that together tell one story. The legal architecture for mass removal is now in place for the Trump administration. A $70 billion enforcement bill to fund the machinery to do it. And a birthday party that couldn't get anyone to show up. The question isn't whether you're for or against immigration enforcement. The question is this system working as intended? My answer is no. And who gets to answer that? And Congress does. They're failing. That's what they're not telling you. I'm Cameron Rudat. This is Average American. See you on Saturday.